And welcome back. In the aftermath of the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court reversing the Roe v. Wade decision, the right whether to allow abortions was returned to the states and has become a political point of controversy. In neighboring Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin has tied Republican hopes for winning the legislative elections next month, just in a matter of days, actually, to the controversial strategy of embracing a new limit on abortion access or or eliminating abortion access after 15 weeks. If successful in Virginia, will the strategy be adopted by anti-abortion activists here in Maryland, which during this past legislative session passed a proposed constitutional amendment expanding the right to abortions in Maryland and is going to be part of a constitutional amendment put for the electorate in the 2024 elections. Now, Nancy, since 1992, when Maryland passed its first constitutional amendment protecting the right to abortion in Maryland, the law has been that abortion in Maryland is legal up to the point of fetal viability. And that's usually defined as something around 16 to 18 weeks. It's not a definite number. And then later, it's if necessary to preserve the life or health of the pregnant person. So is there I never understood why there was a need to change the law to begin with. What do you think?
Well, I am not entirely certain of what the rationale is for putting this back on the table. I think it's a reaction, of course, to what happened at the Supreme Court. And it's a statement to voters in Maryland and to the rest of the world, at least the rest of the country, that abortion is a right in Maryland. Now, I don't think whatever Virginia does is going to affect that. People may certainly pick up that banner. That's what happens. But I don't think that's going to change anything. And I don't think it's going to, it just breaks my heart that we're having these debates of 50 years ago. But nonetheless, that's what's happening. I just don't think Maryland is going to change. And I don't think whatever Virginia does is going to change us.
Well, I think the reason I brought this up is that, in the immediate aftermath of Dobbs' decision, there were a lot of different proposals. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham even suggested a federal limitation on abortion of, I believe it was 16 weeks. And whether or not there's a growing movement, because yes, you are absolutely, there was a reaction to Dobbs, and now this may be a counter reaction to that, which is, I think many people are worried that any changes to existing laws opens the door for late-term abortions. And I think that's the real question, whether or not the energy garnered in Virginia comes over to Maryland. And Mark, most people, even supporters of abortion, oppose late-term abortions. And that's what they're afraid of about the constitutional amendment being proposed.
Well, you're right. That's a flashpoint. I mean, being respectful of very principled people on both sides who either support long-term abortion or want to cut it off at the very beginning. There does seem to be a general opinion, if you look at the opinion poll consensus, at around 15 weeks. And if there's a compromise, it's at that point that is being suggested in Maryland, which is frankly more restrictive than what has been the law in Maryland. I don't see it having very much that, the fact that there is that sense around 15, 16 weeks having an impact in Maryland, because quite frankly, never underestimate the capacity of legislators to offer up laws that are basically redundant and reflect what is an existing law in order to make a statement. And I think that's clearly what's being done here.
Well, but if you can read the amendment that was passed and tell me what it says as to term limits, then on when abortions should be cut off, you're a smarter attorney than I am, because I've reread it twice, and this is what I think anti-abortion activists are going to latch on, is that the vagueness of the law is going to open the door to late-term abortions, something we haven't approved here in Maryland.
Well, Maryland has actually has been less restrictive on late-term abortions than other states, even states like New York that have historically, basically had allowed abortions even before the national change. So Maryland has been farther out on this issue than was previously the case. So that should not be, frankly, a surprise that continues to be the policy in the state.
Nancy, I'll let you have the last word.
I wish men could get pregnant. Maybe you might understand. Nobody wants to have an abortion. It's not a desirable outcome for anybody, but sometimes it happens. Had a niece up in Massachusetts who had to have a late-term abortion because there were serious issues with the baby, and that could have affected her in a big-time way. Who am I to tell her what decision to make? And so, these are not desirable outcomes under any circumstances, but it does happen. And where are all the anti-abortion people when that baby is born with serious issues? Who supports that family? Who supports that woman? Oh, that's another conversation. We'll take care of it in the future. It doesn't happen. So the reality is way different from this academic conversation about when a fetus is viable. Let me tell you that.
Well,
and I'll stop right
I
there.
mean, here's the point. The point is, if as you're suggesting, Nancy, and Mark has suggested, that the Maryland law is broader than actually drafted in the Constitution, then why make changes? Why change? Why make changes to a law that's seems to be working for most people? That's really the point. Anyway, we will debate this because it will be brought up next November for the constitutional amendment and for voters to decide. We'll debate it as it percolates along.